Should be the last one, yeah. I graded already. Well, I graded 21. I have 6 left to do. Probably won't get to them until Monday because I don't usually work over the weekend. And I've got a slideshow I have to complete. Come on, no, I want the lasers on. There. Okay. Yeah. So I think the other class I finished, and this class I have 6 left to do, or something like that. And yeah, the ecosystem disaster project should be the last thing we're assessing. Okay. Population dynamics. So there are 4 variables. No, there's just isn't enough time. I mean, I have 5 days to do 3 weeks worth of stuff. Because this will finish off this unit. Then I have to do nervous system, endocrine system, and excretory system. I'm not going to get through all of that. So I pulled the other class and they wanted to do nervous system. So we're going to start with that first next week, get through a part of the endocrine, and I probably won't be able to get through excretory at all. I'm just going to run out of time. And there's going to be no assignments and no tests for the last unit. I just don't have time because I have to get everything. Basically, your report cards have to be done by the Tuesday the 22nd because OWAC needs them on the 23rd. They're going up at 9 a.m. on the 23rd. So yeah, schedule's a little tight. Okay, so there are 4 variables that control population size: birth, death, immigration, emigration. So what we're going to look at are the factors that affect those 4 variables. Okay, because if you change what impacts those 4 variables, you're going to change population size. Okay, so there are 2 kinds of factors when it comes to regulating populations. Ones that are density independent and ones that are density dependent. Density independent factors are factors where the intensity of the effect does not change depending on population size. So for example, think of a hurricane. If a category 5 hurricane is coming on your location, right? Will the intensity of the storm change depending on the size of the population? In other words, is a category 5 storm wind speed going to go down because it's coming into a village instead of coming into a metropolis? No, the buildings aren't going to reduce the speed. The speed at which it's heading towards you is going to be the same, regardless of whether it's Washington, D.C. Or Mont Tremblant. It doesn't matter. 5 miles away, the wind speeds are going to be exactly the same. It's a category 5. That's why there's a defined level. Or is the intensity of a Richter scale earthquake of level 7 going to be different if it's going to hit Vancouver versus Victoria? No, all the category 7 earthquake is a category 7 earthquake. It doesn't change. So those are density independent factors. Okay. Weather, floods, droughts, forest fires, tornadoes. The intensity of the disturbance does not change depending on population size. Storms don't get weaker just because they're coming into smaller cities. Okay. Tornadoes don't slow down, go from a category 5 to a category F1 because it's coming into a smaller place. Okay. So those are density independent factors. But pesticides would be another good example, right? It doesn't matter if you're only trying to kill 5 weeds or 10,000 weeds, you're going to hit them with the same pesticide, right? Because you want them all dead. The other side of that then is density dependent factor. These are factors where the effect of the factor does change with the size of population. Okay, so if you have a disease that's spreading somewhere, is the disease intensity going to be greater in an area with high population or an area with low population? High. That's density dependent. Okay. So we're talking about things like competition, predation, disease, parasitism. The intensity of these factors increases with increasing population size. Okay. Think of competition for university spots, graduation after high school. Okay. In a normal year, okay, Ontario graduates somewhere about 60 to 65,000 high school students per year. Um, and Ontario usually has maybe 60, 55, 60,000 positions open for new first year students. Okay. So obviously not everyone gets in. So there's a certain level of competition. But in 2001, that competition was dramatically higher. Anyone know what happened in 2001? So roughly 21 years ago. What happened that year to that year's graduating classes? No, no, it was a high school graduation. Something specifically happened to that. The school year of the 2000, 2001. Notice what I said. There were graduating classes. Not a graduating class of 2001. There were graduating classes of 2001. Much more people. Yeah. Because that year was the year of the double cohort. That was the year that Ontario ended the OAC or grade 13 program. Therefore, that was the year the grade 12s graduated for the first times and the grade 13s graduated for the last time. There were two graduating classes. Okay. The number of kids graduating high school in Ontario that year was something on the order of 140,000 students. Now, obviously, they had to increase the number of spots. In a regular year, it's usually about 65,000 for 55,000 available spots. That year, they increased the number of spots to 80,000. So you had 140,000 kids graduating, competing for 80,000 spots. And that bubble went through for 4 years, right? Because the ones that didn't make it would apply the next year, impacting the kids coming in the 2001, 2002 year. Competition was much, much higher that year because of the double cohort. We had a 3.5, 4 hour long ceremony because we had to graduate double the number of kids, right? Our normal graduation is about 260 kids. We had well over 500 that year walks the stage. So it was a really long ceremony. Okay. There is another interesting effect called the Ali effect. Now, the density, it's also a density dependent factor, but what's interesting about the first four factors, the bigger the population, the larger the effect. The Ali effect is the opposite, okay? It has a bigger impact the smaller the population is, okay? What that means is this. If you have a small population, okay, there's going to be inbreeding and genetic drift in that population, mainly because it's small, right? So the members of the population are going to breed with each other, and there's going to be random genetic variation just because the population is small. Because of these two factors, there's going to be a loss of genetic diversity. That loss of diversity causes a reduction in fitness, and the population is no longer as adaptable. Okay, that means there has to be lower reproduction and higher mortality rates, which leads to a smaller population, which leads to more inbreeding, more genetic drift, and this effect gets, because the population gets smaller every round, the effect gets bigger and bigger and bigger. It can lead to extirpation or extinction of the population. Extinction, you guys know. What's extirpation? No, close. So extinction is loss of a species worldwide. Okay. But Yellowstone National Park had an extirpation of wolves in the 1970s and 80s. But yeah, they import it. You don't necessarily have to import. Okay. So extirpation just means a local loss of species in a particular area. Okay. So, for example, in Europe, or in Asia, they've had a big loss of uh, ash trees, right? But ash trees still exist in the rest of the world. Therefore, Asia has had an extirpation of ash trees. Now, that's coming over here because the emerald ash borer has made its way to North America. We're having problems here as well, but that's what extirpated means. Okay, so if we look at niches, there are two kinds of niches that we're going to be talking about, and I'll talk about it in the next slide. Okay, these are barnacles, right? They're sea creatures that live by attaching themselves to some substrate, usually rock, okay? And they make a living in the intertidal zone. Now, there are, in this particular picture, two different species of barnacles. Up top here, the smaller guys are Cathalamus, and the bigger ones are Semibalanus. Now, if you look at the smaller barnacles, you'll notice that their dotted line goes from the top of the high tide line to the bottom of the intertidal zone, and it's labeled their fundamental niche. This is the total area that the smaller barnacles can live in. It can survive. This entire area is habitable. But where you find them is between the low tide line and the high tide line. That's where you will actually find them. And that's what we call the realized niche, where they're actually found. If you look at their larger species, their fundamental niche is from the bottom of the intertidal zone to the top of the water line at low tide. They can't live out of water. So their fundamental niche and their realized niche are exactly the same. So why is it that species one doesn't exist in its full fundamental niche? Why doesn't it exist down here? Yeah, exactly. Okay. So the fundamental niche is the total area that you can survive in. The realized niche is the area where you are actually you're going to be found. Okay. So we can test for this, and they tested by removing species two. Species one will then actually end up moving down and occupying the entire intertidal zone. But at the deeper depths, species two outcompetes species one, so excludes it from being in the area where it could be. Okay, so long as this isn't here, one can take over the whole area. But if species two is there, one is stuck. Okay, all right, so we're going to look at competition next. We're going to start with we're only going to look at one type of, no, yeah, basically. They also can't live without water, whereas the um, species one can tolerate drought conditions for, a few hours. Okay, this is the only intra-specific or within species competition factor we're going to look at. So intra-specific is inside your own species, right? So we see this kind of behavior a lot in nature. All right, we have two elk during rutting season trying to establish dominance as to who is going to get a mate. And so they're head bashing, right? We see this in birds. We call it establishing a pecking order, especially if you've ever lived in or worked out on a farm. Well, not just hockey players, right? In the hallways of any public school, you see this quite a bit, okay? So interspecific competition, the idea of, yeah, within their own species. Exactly. Trying to establish dominance over the other. Okay. But that's not the type of competition we're really interested in. What we're more interested in is inter-specific competition. Competition between members of two different species. One of the classic examples of that would be things like hyena and lions. Now, with interspecific competition, there is something called Gauss's law that kind of dominates the competitive interaction of two species, and it's called the competitive exclusion principle. One thing to note, competition is considered a negative relationship because although one organism wins and the other organism loses in terms of the competition, they both spend more energy than either one would actually win. Okay. So it's a loss-loss relationship. Okay. So the competitive exclusion principle is that if you have two species that are competing for the same resources and everything else is equal, then they will not coexist because they cannot share resources. They won't. One species must win and the other species must lose. Okay. A lab demonstration of that occurred in the 80s. So these are different species of Paramecium, a protist. So this one living by itself does fine. This other one living by itself, the orange line, also shows that it does fine. But put them together, and eventually the blue one will outcompete the orange one, and the orange one will decline and finally die out. They won't share. Okay, and that's the competitive exclusion principle. Two organisms that are competing against each other will never share a resource. Okay, they can't, which is why humans are interesting. Okay, so when it comes to competition, there are two kinds of interference. Okay, there's interference, or two kinds of competition. There's interference competition, so that's lions versus hyenas. Okay, in interference competition, you have two species or two organisms from two different species that are in direct conflict with each other. They're fighting each other. They're battling it out. Okay, so that's interference competition. Okay. The other type of competition is called exploitative competition. In exploitative competition, one species uses the resource, so the other one no longer has access. Okay. Think of if you have a pet dog and your pet dog likes to beg for food at the dinner table and you're eating, that's exploitative competition. Your dog is begging for food, but you've eaten that steak. Since you've ingested it, the dog can no longer get it. You've competed with him and you've used it or exploited that resource. Therefore, the dog can't have it. Okay. This petri dish shows the exact same thing. You've got fungi here, right, competing against bacteria here. The fungi has used up this resource, and therefore the bacteria can't use it. Hey, Simone. Um, so you've missed about a half an hour. Do you still want to try writing the test today? Okay. Then I've got a breakout set up here. Just copy the link. Okay. So you can go into that breakout. And then if you look here on class work under genetics test, the test is already there for you. So you just have to click on your name and you should be able to download the file so that you can write your test. Yeah, do it in the breakout because I'm going to be lecturing here and I'll distract you. So it should be right there for you to take a look at. Okay. All right. So exploitative competition. Another good example of exploitative competition. Think of uh, the different plants in a forest. Okay. If you're in a densely packed forest, do you want to be a really, really tall tree with big leaves, or do you want to be a short bush? Yeah, because you want to capture as much sunlight as you possibly can, right? Exploitative competition, because the really tall, big leafy trees have captured as much of the resources they possibly can, leaving very little left for the undergrowth, right? So that's another good example of exploitative competition. Okay, I'm going to show you from YouTube. It's a fuzzy video because it's like 8 years ago. a good video that shows you predation, intraspecific competition, interference competition, all kinds of fairly neat things. It's fairly long though.
I've been using Grammarly since high school. I'm going to tell you guys a bit more about Grammarly. So what the application provides is in-depth writing feedback and
very intently watching the buffalo who are moving right over there. This could be very interesting.
I assume you can see this.
That is a huge buffalo.
That's a huge buffalo.
It's a huge buffalo.
Even the lion.
No,
There are.
The one's gone already.
Don't you think there's a little?
I don't know. I think they're a bit young. I don't know. Maybe. They're getting ready.
They're crouching.
She's quite big.
No, it's a touch position. Where's that female? Can't see her. This isn't nice.
They're running away.
Uh-oh. What's the bull gonna do?
She's trying to eat this.
Oh my god.
She's gonna grab the baby.
Oh my god.
I'll grab the baby.
She's
Watch.
going for him. She's going for him. She got him. Oh, she did. She got him.
Watch the water.
Hey, these gonnies just plucked a buffalo here. Oh my god. God, did you see that? Oh my
Watch
God.
what comes out of the water.
Unbelievable.
You didn't have fun in this ground or anything.
Oh, guys, I'm shaking. Can you believe this? The buffalo are coming to help this one now. Watch.
They're too
They'll
late.
come and help this baby. Watch.
They're too late. Can they help him now, Frank?
Yeah, they can.
He's still alive, you think?
Oh, he's still alive.
My goodness.
Russell for Frank.
They're trying to drag him out. They're dragging him out.
Hulle het nou net 'n kleintjie gevang. Hier's lekker action hier so, jong. Hulle het 'n kleintjie hier so in die water en die trop is besig om nader te kom.
It's on its back. I hope they kill it quickly.
Oh, it's still alive.
Ja, positief. Hulle het 'n klein buffeltjie gevang hier so.
There's a crocodile there too.
Ja, daar's 'n krokodil ook. Daar gryp 'n krokodil ook die kleintjie.
The
Yes.
crocodile crocodile.
Yeah.
Coming out big
Yeah,
bite.
check through the banners. The croc's trying to grab the baby.
Yes. Good gracious.
Look at this. The crocodile's taking the baby away.
Little thing getting oh my god. They're two crocodiles.
They're gonna lose it.
Oh my
Oh,
god.
they're gonna fight over it.
Jeez, I'm shaking.
Oh my god.
Oh, he's coming for huge crocodile. Three.
Oh, look at those dogs.
The lions have won.
The lions have won.
Oh, the lions have won.
Yeah, but look at all those buffalo coming.
the buffalo.
No, they're gonna come and try and chase the lion, but I think they're too late.
I think you're right.
They're way too late now.
No, they're gonna chase him. Come on.
No, they're too late.
Oh, look at the teeth. Look at them. They're gonna look at the teeth, Jay. Look at them.
You're too late.
Check this.
You're too late.
Hey, you guys, you cannot believe what's going on here. There's a big pair here between lions, crocodiles, and buffaloes.
Whoa! He swatted at him and kicked at him. He's kicking at him. Look, he's kicking at him.
Ja, julle ouens, julle moet sien wat hier aangaan, jong. Die buffels is besig om die leeu's te omsingel hierso en want die leeu's het 'n klein njattie gevang. En hierdie njatties wil die leeu's nou bykom. Hulle jag die leeu's links en regs.
Ooh, they got him surrounded.
Ja, jy kan maar kom, jong. Hier's groot
that one's-
actie.
Ooh!
Big boy.
Where'd it go in the water?
You got the lion on him, run.
That little buffalo is still alive.
Brave king of the beast. The others are doing that. They're going at the other end.
Yes, can you believe this?
Never seen that.
I've never seen anything like
The
that.
calf's still alive.
It is?
Yeah, it's trying to get away. It's standing up.
It is. It's still alive. Oh, is it? Oh, and I'm pushing them into the water. It's standing up. It's standing up. It ran away.
Ja, they've got
He's
it back.
gone.
It's got it back. They've got him back.
They do have him back.
Ja, hierdie buffels het die leeu's weggevat van daai kleintjie af en
They got him back.
Alle jag
And
die
the
leeu's
other
weg.
ones. They've been chasing him.
We're still chasing him.
Back in the canoe. And the two lions are lying back. She's stop it.
I've never seen anything like that.
Look, we're running. There's two left.
Gee, they chased him away.
But they hooked the one, did you see they hooked the one?
Dude,
Look
they
at
look
this.
the one.
And they got the other one.
Go on, Buffalo, go on.
And there's another one. Oh, the big one.
Look at this big bull.
Run!
That leeu's, that lion's injured, you see that? But you see that buffalo further on in the air?
Yes.
Yeah, these others are coming to help as well.
These are some more coming to them.
Yeah, I got him. I got him being thrown in the air.
Njatties het die, daai klein njattie.
So the rest of it is just them chatting about it. The reason that the baby probably survived is because the lions never got a good clamp on the neck, right? That's how they often kill, is that they'll clamp their jaws around the neck of the prey item, and then basically choke it to death. Yeah, I mean, it probably has, as long as its wounds aren't deep and they don't get affected, it should be fine. How long does it? I'm not sure. Same order as horses, I would guess. Maybe a little less than that, because obviously you've got predators, whereas domesticated horses don't really have predators as long as humans are around. So they have the potential to, last 15, 20 years, but they probably go around 10. Yeah, and humans also have technology, right? That's what helps. I mean, imagine if all you had were clothing and you had a bear after you, right? I mean, I wonder if I can find that video.
This is the checkers game where grandson and granddad will bond.
This is the kitchen where
In that moment, I don't have much time to think. I run over to the bear, and the first thing I think to do is to push the bear off the ledge it's standing on.
She's your age. She's 17 and she fought a bear.
It's horrifying to see your daughter approach a huge bear and just thinking that the bear could have swiped at her face and we would be having another kind of news today.
She was reacting to the perceived threat of the dogs. And if this animal was inherently aggressive, those dogs probably would have gotten attacked instead of just swiped at.
Do not push bears. Do not get close to bears. You do not want to get unlucky. I just happened to come out unscathed.
Okay, who wants to go tackle a bear? Okay. So, competitive exclusion. No two similar species can occupy the same niche at the same time, right? That's why lions and tigers, both top predators of the food chain, would never coexist in the same ecosystem. They can't, because they would not share the prey resources. One would have to win and one would have to lose. Who would win? I don't know. Tough call. Okay. So the result of competition past can be one of two things. Okay. So you can call both resource partitioning and character displacement as the results of competitive exclusion. Okay. In resource partitioning, what you have happening, these are 5 different warbler birds. Normally, in the past, they would have had intense competition for this one resource, the tree. What they end up doing, though, is because of that competition, they want to reduce the competition so they can survive. So they established micro niches that they can inhabit such that they lower the amount of competition, because the yellow-rumped warbler now only uses the interior portion of the tree. If a bay-breasted warbler comes in and it is going to compete at the same level, then the bay-breasted will move up higher. If a black-throated green warbler and a bay-breasted warbler are both around, the yellow rump will probably move down to the lower branches. This guy will move into this area here, and the black-throated green warbler will stay in this region above the two of them, right? And they basically partition out where they're going to be, lowering the amount of competition between their memberships such that they're no longer in direct competition with each other, okay? So that's one way you can deal with high levels of competition. The other thing that could occur is something called character displacement. So these are a couple of Darwin's finches on the Galapagos Island. And what you can see, right, is that when they exist by themselves, so on the island of Daphne, the large finch has a beak range that goes from just under 9 to just under 12. The smaller finch has a beak range that goes from just over 8 to just under 11. So the two ranges overlap. But on these two islands, Santa Maria and San Cristobal, the two birds are found both on the same island. And what have they done? Well, the smaller bird has been directionally selected such that the smaller beaks do better, and so their beaks have shifted to the smaller size. The larger ones, the bigger beaks have been selected for, so they directionally selected to the larger size. Now the two species don't overlap, and since they don't overlap, they don't compete anymore. So here they're probably eating the same kinds of food. Here they wouldn't be because their beak sizes are very, very different. So the character beak depth was displaced by the two organisms competing against each other. Okay. Now, that's not the only symbiotic interaction you can have, okay, which is what we've been discussing. You also have predation and parasitism, mutualism and commensalism. Okay, now, as I said, competition is a negative experience. Both organisms lose out because they both use up energy. Predation and parasitism is a plus-minus relationship. One species gets an advantage that the other one does not. Mutualism, both species benefits, and commensalism, one species benefits and the other has no impact. Okay, so we're going to look at these three next. That's different examples of all of these things. Okay, predator-prey relationships. Okay, the adaptations that predators have is to locate and subdue their prey. So what do predators have? Okay, looking at this raptor, what are some of the adaptations that it has to help it locate and subdue prey? Okay, but what kind of eyesight? Is its eyesight different from that of, say, a moose? Yeah, forward vision. Okay, so the position of the eyeballs is one. What else? What would you find at the feet of this animal? Yeah, fast diving speeds. Yeah. Yeah, so those are all offensive weapons. Okay. Same thing with this predatory cat. If you look at this cougar, right, what adaptations assist it? Yeah. Sharp claws. It's probably got pretty long canines as well. Okay. But if you look at prey, they also have adaptations to elude and defend. Okay. So you've got these gazelle. They've got horns, speed, coloration, spines, thorns, and toxins, right? Think of chilies, right? A lot of the spices that we like to put in our food are actually defensive toxins. It's just that, weirdly enough, we like the flavor of them. Therefore, yeah, exactly. But not to a lot of other animals, right? You like a little bit of cinnamon, but would you take in a teaspoon of cinnamon? Or a tablespoon, I think is a challenge. Right? Oregano, thyme, rosemary. Okay. Those are all toxins to defend against predation. So is TCA, right? So yeah, we're weird in that we like some of these toxins and therefore we add it to our food to flavor it. But, you know, would you go and eat a habanero chili? Yeah, me, no. Right? Having seen Ian Stewart's reaction to habanero chili, I'm not the kind of person that's going to go and eat that. Let's see if I can find it.
This is how normal people search. Scroll down. Enter. Read the entire thing.
Đất đó sẽ phải chịu một áp lực rất lớn do một lượng lớn thực vật bị tiêu thụ.
Subtitle version, that's no good.
Here.
I think they've deleted the videos. The BBC gave them a strike. Okay, I can't show it. Anyways, back to this. Well, there is a theoretical version of that. It's a half-hour show, though, so I'm not going to show it, but I think YouTube had something like that. Yeah, no, they don't have it. But there was a TV show that basically did look at stuff like that. Okay, so continuing on with this. So predation, obviously, provides a really strong selection pressure for both prey and predator, because the predator doesn't want to go hungry and the prey doesn't want to get eaten. Okay, so if we look at this, right, this is Banff. Okay, and in the 1970s, wolves were extirpated from that park. Okay, they recovered when they brought some in from Jasper. Okay, so when the wolves were extirpated, the elk population itself soared, which makes sense, right? No more predator. The problem was overgrazing and damaging of willow and aspen trees by the elk. Okay, that led to a loss of trees, so you lose songbirds as well as beavers, and there was a huge and massive loss of biodiversity. Yellowstone also saw something similar. Okay.
Oh, hello. You must be here for your appointment. Your funny appointment. I'm here to help.
One of the most exciting scientific findings of the past half-century has been the discovery of widespread trophic cascades. A trophic cascade is an ecological process which starts at the top of the food chain and tumbles all the way down to the bottom. And the classic example is what happened in the Yellowstone National Park in the United States when wolves were reintroduced in 1995. Now, we all know that wolves kill various species of animals, but perhaps we're slightly less aware that they give life to many others. before the wolves turned up, they'd been absent for 70 years, that the numbers of deer, because there was nothing to hunt them, had built up in the Yellowstone Park, and despite efforts by humans to control them, they'd managed to reduce much of the vegetation there to almost nothing. They'd just grazed it away. But as soon as the wolves arrived, even though they were few in number, they started to have the most remarkable effects. First, of course, they killed some of the deer, but that wasn't the major thing. Much more significantly, they radically changed the behavior of the deer. The deer started avoiding certain parts of the park, the places where they could be trapped most easily, particularly the valleys and the gorges. And immediately those places started to regenerate. In some areas, the height of the trees quintupled in just 6 years. Bare valley sides quickly became forests of aspen and willow and cottonwood. And as soon as that happened, the birds started moving in. The number of songbirds, of migratory birds, started to increase greatly. The number of beavers started to increase because beavers like to eat the trees. And beavers, like wolves, are ecosystem engineers. They create niches for other species. And the dams they built in the rivers provided habitats for otters and muskrats and ducks and fish and reptiles and amphibians. The wolves killed coyotes, and as a result of that, the number of rabbits and mice began to rise, which meant more hawks, more weasels, more foxes, more badgers. Ravens and bald eagles came down to feed on the carrion that the wolves had left. Bears fed on it too, and their population began to rise as well, partly also because there were more berries growing on the regenerating shrubs. And the bears reinforced the impact of the wolves by killing some of the calves of the deer. But here's where it gets really interesting. The wolves changed the behavior of the rivers. They began to meander less. There was less erosion, the channels narrowed, more pools formed, more riffle sections, all of which were great for wildlife habitats. The rivers changed in response to the wolves. And the reason was that the regenerating forests stabilized the banks so that they collapsed less often, so that the rivers became more fixed in their course. Similarly, by driving the deer out of some places and the vegetation recovering on the valley sides, there was less soil erosion because the vegetation stabilized that as well. So the wolves, small in number, transformed not just the ecosystem of the Yellowstone National Park, this huge area of land, but also its physical geography.
You're mute.
Yeah, it's 10:30. It's 1:30. So let's take a 10-minute break, and then we'll finish off this slideshow. So see you in 10. So we talked about this. All right, we've seen this before when we talked about carrying capacity, but let's look at the fact that the population cycled anyways, right? That's what's kind of interesting in terms of this picture, right? Populations go up and down, up and down, up and down. They have this sinusoidal pattern. Question is why? One of the ideas that was out there is that the cycling is due to predator-prey interaction. So when predator levels are high, it causes prey numbers to go down because of overfeeding. And then when the predators get starved out, the prey numbers come back up, right? So that's why you have this cycling. That was one hypothesis. The other possibility was, is it an interaction between the consumer and the producer, the grass that the rabbits are eating? Is the snowshoe hare cycle dependent upon the availability of grass, and that cycling then sets the cycling of the lynx? So is it top down or is it bottom up? And so is there a way that you can test this? Well, you have to do one of two things in order to test this. You have to vary the amount of predators, or you have to vary the amount of food. Well, how would you do that? How could you vary the number of predators or the amount of food in an ecological study site? Any ideas? Okay. Yeah, kind of. So this is the guy who did the study, one of my profs at UBC, Charlie Krebs. And him and Tony Sinclair, they had Dolph Shore, they had an amazing ecology group at UBC, right? And they, one of their major research sites was the Kluane Research Forest up in the Yukon. So they set up they did this particular study that took over 10 years to do. And the basic idea was, in the research forest, okay, they set up plots. Now, these plots were 1 kilometer square. Okay, so they set up electric fences in a 1 square kilometer plot they set up 4 of these sites in Kluane. Okay, and number 1 was control. So all they did was they left it alone. They didn't change anything in that first plot. Okay, in the second plot, we went in and we removed all the lynx from the area. Okay. In the third plot, we left the lynx there, but we increased the amount of food that would have been available for the rabbits. In the last group, we took out all the predators again and added more food. Okay. This was all to see which one of these would have the greatest impact on the cycle on altering rabbit population sizes. Okay. Here's the results. Okay. So in the control, if we set the control level at 1, removing all the lynx predators caused the snowshoe hare population to double over control. Okay. If we left the lynx in there, but just increased the amount of food available for the hares, then the population of bunnies went up 3 times. But if you increase the food the same amount, and then remove all the predators, the number of hares in that 4th field went up by 11 times over control values. Okay. So the results of this field experiment indicate strong effects of food and predators on the number of snowshoe hares. So the conclusion was, it was a combination of both food availability and increased predation. It's a top-down and bottom-up effect. Both impact the numbers of hare, which then contributes to the cycling of the system. And this may be true for all population cycling. A lot of graduate students involved in this particular study. The brutal part was taking down the fences and such. Okay, we're not doing this. All right. So we know that the prey or the predators have a lot of offensive weapons. Well, the prey also have anti-predator adaptations, ways to defend themselves. Okay, so they can hide from predators, which is they want to avoid detection. So they can use things like camouflage. Okay, they can also warn predators. How would you warn a predator that you're something that you don't want to eat? Yeah, what's that called? That kind of warning system. What's that called? Okay, you're advertising that you're undesirable as prey. It's called aposematic coloration. What colors are often used in aposematic coloration? What colors say, don't eat me? Yellow, red, yeah, those are two big ones. Not blue. Blue is very edible. Not so much. There's two other colors that are huge. We'll talk about them in a minute. Okay, so apo means away, somatic sign or meaning. Okay, then there's two other ways of using mimicry to defend yourself, and we'll talk about that as well. To a lesser extent, purple. Okay, so what system is this lizard using? Yeah, that's camouflage. Okay, what's the monarch butterfly using? Which is what? Yeah, aposematic coloration. So there's the other two colors you guys missed were orange and black. Orange, black, yellow, and red are often used as warning coloration. Okay, so if we're looking at these defense mechanisms, okay, so these are examples of camouflage. Yeah, orange is to yellow to some extent as well. Okay, also known as cryptic coloration. Okay, so that bird is a whippoorwill trying to blend into its environment. Okay, any idea what that is? Yeah, that's a lizard. Okay, we've got a toad there. That lizard we already saw. And another frog there. Okay, now there's a really neat video on camouflage. Yeah, it's this one. Okay. Watch this video. Tell me when you see the octopus.
I have to admit I was screaming when I got this video thing.
What makes a marine biologist scream? Roger Hanlon captured this about 10 years ago. He was doing a study in the Caribbean and he'd been following this octopus for about an hour. When it crept behind the rock and went into camouflage mode, he
jammed the camera down right in its face, so to speak,
prompting it to go from camouflage to a startle defense.
Blanching white very quickly.
And then inking him.
But I followed the animal and finished the dive, and I popped to the surface. It was only about 5 feet deep, and I screamed bloody murder, and they thought I was having a dive accident.
When actually he was having...
It was a eureka moment, there's no doubt about it.
And that's because Hanlon is trying to understand just how camouflage works in cephalopods.
Yes, cephalopods, squid, octopus, and cuttlefish.
They are masters of optical illusion.
They are the animals best known to go anywhere in camouflage. No animal comes even close to the speed and diversity of appearances of this animal.
And they have a few tricks at their disposal. Octopus and cuttlefish can change their skin texture.
This is the only animal group we know of that has fine control of its skin to create the bumpiness.
And they match their skin dimensionality by sight, not by touch, which is a
vexing visual perception question.
And of course, they change color. So here's an octopus
doing what we call the moving rock trick.
I'm a rock, I'm a rock. Now watch this.
So the amazing thing is that these animals are colorblind, yet they are capable of creating color-matched patterns. But we don't know how.
But of course Hanlon would like to. And one way he's studying this is by looking closely at squid skin. That's what you're seeing here.
These are super close-up images of live unanesthetized squid.
And those dots of pigment are called chromatophores. They come in 3 colors.
Yellow, red, and brown. But there are reflectors under the pigments, and the reflectors produce the short wavelengths, the blues and the greens.
And as you can see, the chromatophores can change shape to change the predominant skin color.
Each one of those little spots on there can expand up to 15 times its diameter.
And these chromatophores seem to be twitching all the time.
They camouflage all night long. They don't sleep as far as we know.
That's because cephalopods, with their squishy bodies, rely on camouflage as their main protection from predators. But of course, camouflage is not just color, it's also pattern. This is one of Hanlon's major hypotheses.
We found only 3 to 4 basic pattern templates that they use to achieve all this camouflage.
So there's uniform.
By uniform, we mean that there's little or no contrast in the pattern.
There's mottle.
Mottle is small-scale light and dark splotches.
And disruptive, and the idea there is
to interfere with the recognition of what the animal is.
Based on lab studies, Hanlon says that the animals flash particular patterns based on a few visual cues they encounter in the environment. Hanlon wouldn't call it a reflex because so much visual analysis is involved.
But it is very fast.
The palette and pattern changing in less than a second. But just why these patterns work is still kind of a mystery. Let's take the octopus video again. Hanlon analyzed this video frame by frame, but he can't tell you why you don't see the animal.
We can't find any true statistical matches, whether it's brightness, color, between the animal and the background. So camouflage is not looking exactly like the background.
Camouflage just means fooling whatever's looking at you, which suggests
we're behind the 8 ball, as it were, if we think the world looks like how we see it. There's much more information there, and other animals see it very differently.
For Science Friday, I'm Flora Lichtman.
Mimicry is when a model animal copies or mimics the host animal or the model animal. Okay, so this is an example of mimicry. Now this is called Batesian mimicry. And in Batesian mimicry, the edible species or the harmless species is going to mimic a harmful model. So this is the green parrot snake, which is pretty venomous. And this is the hawk moth larvae, which is pretty edible. And when the hawk moth larvae finds itself in a dangerous situation, it basically puffs itself up so that it looks like a poisonous snake, and then the predators basically leave it alone. Okay, so that's Batesian mimicry. Another classic example of Batesian mimicry are these butterflies. Which one's the monarch? Yeah, The one with the dot is the monarch. This is the viceroy. The viceroy almost looks like it's got a smile at the bottom of its wing. The monarch does not. So this is the monarch, and this is the viceroy. What makes the monarch poisonous? Why is it inedible? Does anyone know? Okay, what does the caterpillar of, the monarch, right? It feeds only on milkweed. Well, milkweed has a toxin in it, okay? And it's the monarch butterfly caterpillar is the only organism that can tolerate that toxin. And so it incorporates that toxin into its tissues. So if a naive bird, a bird that has never had a monarch butterfly before, comes along and eats a monarch butterfly, 20 minutes later or so, this is the reaction of the blue jay. Okay? This bird, now that it's gone through this experience, will never touch another butterfly that looks even remotely similar to a monarch. It's learned. This only works as long as the monarch is the first butterfly that the naive bird encounters. If it encounters a viceroy first, it obviously doesn't work. Okay, so this is another example of Batesian mimicry. So this is the model, and this is the mimic. Okay. The other type of mimicry, though, is Mullerian. And in Mullerian, both species are harmful. Okay. If in your homeschool, in your biology class, you had a flying, buzzing, yellow and black insect come flying into the room, what's your response? Okay, but do you just sit still, or do you do what half the kids in my class do, which is start screaming, go running out of the room? Half the kids in my classes always go tearing out of the room. Okay, why? Right? What these guys are, they're stingers, and that's not what you want to have done to you. Okay. So if you see an insect, flying insect that's yellow and black and striped, you usually get away with from it. So yes, this is Mullerian mimicry because both species tend to look like each other, but it's also aposematic coloration. Because you see any insect that's yellow and black, you go away from it because you know that's a warning coloration for a stinging insect. Okay. Is that why school buses repel small school children as well? Yellow and black stripes. Okay. So two protected species that look like each other, Mullerian mimicry. Okay. They're both harmful. So this is a yellow jacket, and this is a cuckoo bee. Okay. You can't really see this, so I'll just ignore it. So aposematic species resemble each other in terms of the colors that they use. Okay. These guys are all toxic. Right? I have one more picture here, but I realized later that it's a king snake, not a coral snake. It's non-toxic. So that's a non-toxic snake. But it looks a lot like the toxic one. Okay. The way you tell the difference between a king snake and a coral snake, red touches black is a king snake, and red touches yellow is coral. Now, what do I mean by that? So red touches yellow. That's the venomous coral snake. Red touches black. That's a non-venomous king snake. So this is a form of Batesian mimicry as well, although it's not perfect. But it's similar enough that if you don't know that, it's really, really hard to tell apart. Now, another neat camouflage one I want to show you. Yeah. Let's see if I can find this. Is let's see if I can get a better picture. Okay. In this image, oh, why did it go dark? Kind of sucks. Oh, there it is. Can you find the snake? It's a copper snake. You step on it, it's pretty venomous. See if you can find it in a bigger picture. There it is. Right there. So if you look up here, that's it right there. But there's a better picture there when you highlight it. Right? That's camouflage. Okay? So orange, red. No, they're in the US. Orange, black, red, yellow basically means don't eat me. Well, they're trying to develop it, especially the military, right? Light bending materials such that you can see through to let a person become invisible. That's being worked on. Ever seen the movie Predator? Imagine if that technology came to life. Okay, let's finish this off. There's a few things to look at. Parasitism. Another plus-minus relationship. So both parasitism and predation are plus-minus. Okay, what's the difference between the two? So in a predator-prey, who gets the plus and who gets the minus? Yeah, predator benefits, and the prey doesn't. It dies. Okay. What about in a parasitic relationship? Well, there's no, right? So in parasites, the plus goes to the parasite and minus goes to the host, right? So if they're both plus minus, what's the difference between a parasitic relationship and a predator relationship? Well, it's in what happens to the victim. Okay. In a predator prey, yeah. What state does the prey end up in? Dead. But in a good parasite, what state does the host end up as? Dead or alive? alive, right? A bad parasite is one that kills its host, because if the host dies, so does the parasite. Okay. One of a really good example of that is the common cold. Okay. So the common cold is a really, really good parasite. I mean, unless you're really immunocompromised, a common cold is not going to kill you, but it will allow the cold virus to replicate and continue seeking more hosts, right? That's what we call a really good. Yeah, but those hosts, those parasites are too strong, right? And they're usually new parasites. COVID-19 will be an example of a new parasite because it's killing its hosts. But now that it's endemic, if it comes around, if it sticks with us for a few hundred years, it'll weaken. It'll become seasonal like the regular flu or the cold. More like the flu. And then the flu itself, there are some flus that have been wiped out by this particular pandemic. They don't exist anymore because they had nothing to attack because everyone was locked away in their homes. Yeah, you're thinking of the cordyceps fungi. That's parasitic, you're right, but it kills its host. Okay, so when we talk about parasites, we're talking about viruses, protists, insects, worms, fleas, and ticks. I'll show you something on cordyceps later, depending on time. They can be ectoparasites or endoparasites. So an ectoparasite is one that's on the surface of your body, leeches. Endoparasites are one that are found inside your body, like Plasmodium, the malaria-causing parasite. There's also macroparasites, ones you can see with the naked eye, and microparasites, ones that you can't. You need a microscope. Okay, so this dog shows you the different kinds of endo and ecto, macro, and microparasites that dogs can get, which is why you have to treat dogs and cats if they're going outside. Okay, if we look at mutualism, which is a plus-plus relationship, okay, we're talking about lichen, hermit crabs, sea anemones, and bullhorn acacias, okay? Both benefit. When we look at lichen are algae and fungi. The algae provide the carbohydrates, the fungi provide the nitrogen, okay? Hermit crab is protected by the sea anemone's tentacles, which are toxic. So this guy, the sea anemone, will sting anything coming to attack the hermit crab. And the sea anemone benefits because the hermit crab is moving around, so it gets to new areas to feed. The bullhorn acacia gives a place for the ants to live, and because these are stinging ants, when another insect comes along to try and eat from the bullhorn acacia, the stinging ants come out in overwhelming numbers and wipe it out, okay, protecting the bullhorn acacia from predation. So these are mutualistic relationships. The one that's really hard to figure out is commensalism. Is it really plus zero? So best example of a commensalistic behavior is caribou in the north during winter and wolves. Okay? Because in winter, there's obviously snow on the ground. So what are the caribou going to have to do to eat grass? To eat the vegetation that they need over the winter? What do they have to do to the snow? Yeah, they're going to dig through it. They're going to break it up. Okay. And what you'll often have is you'll have wolves following the caribou, not to attack the caribou. Once the caribou have done eating and they've broken up the snow, what wolves do is they come to where the fresh area where the caribou were. And what's happened is basically all the mouse tunnels have been collapsed and opened up. So the wolves basically go into the area and start snapping up and eating the mice that are running around that area. The caribou, no impact, because they're not getting any benefit from what the wolves are doing. But the wolves are getting food from what the caribou are doing. That is a commensalistic relationship. Are these other ones really commensalistic? Hard to say. Remora and shark Well, remoras are those fish with a sucker on their head. They attach to the shark, and then the shark swims along, and the remora are transported along with them. Is it really mutualistic or commensalistic? No, because generally speaking, the surprisingly, wolves don't eat that many caribou. Their bigger fodder is usually small rodents. That's what they primarily eat in the north, even in the summers. So if you look at these, right, both the remora and shark, as well as whales and barnacles, is it truly commensalistic? Okay, because what do you think happens to the swim efficiency of the nurse shark or the whale with a remora or barnacles attached to it? What's going to happen to the amount of drag the animal experiences? Yeah, the drag is going to increase like crazy, which means that there's going to be much more energy that the shark and or whale has to exert in order to swim at the same speed. So is it really commensalistic? Tough call. Okay. Cattle egrets and large mammals. Well, the cattle egrets get a benefit because they're now high up. So they can see higher and further into the grass looking for predators. Okay, but if they see a predator and start squawking and start running away, the big mammals are warned too. So is it really commensalistic or is this more mutualistic? Tough call. Okay. I said I would show you. Yeah, the question is, commensalistic relationships, you really have to look to see if they really are commensalistic. Is it really a zero relationship? Or is it a plus minus or a plus plus relationship? Just because of the way these guys might interact with their host. Okay, I said I would show you the video on the cordyceps.
Incredibly, 80% of all insects live in jungles. Few are more successful than the ants. There can be 8 million individuals in a single hectare. But jungle ants don't have it all their own way. These bullet ants are showing some worrying symptoms. Spores from a parasitic fungus called cordyceps have infiltrated their bodies and their minds. Its infected brain directs this ant upwards. Then, utterly disorientated, it grips a stem with its mandibles. Those afflicted that are discovered by the workers are quickly taken away and dumped far away from the colony. It seems extreme, but this is the reason why. Like something out of science fiction, the fruiting body of the cordyceps erupts from the ant's head. It can take 3 weeks to grow, and when finished, the deadly spores will burst from its tip. Then, any ant in the vicinity will be in serious risk of death. The fungus is so virulent, it can wipe out whole colonies of ants. And it's not just ants that fall victim to this killer. There are literally thousands of different types of cordyceps fungi, and remarkably, Each specializes on just one species. But these attacks do have a positive effect on the jungle's diversity, since parasites like these stop any one group of animal getting the upper hand. The more numerous a species becomes, the more likely it will be attacked by its nemesis, a cordyceps fungus. Incredibly,
Well, since there are nearly 8 billion of us, does that mean that the human population needs a cordyceps fungi? I don't think there are any. I'm going to look that up. Are there human cordyceps? I guess in the video game there is. Right? Has anyone here played Last of Us? Okay. In The Last of Us, cordyceps adds humans to its list of hosts. Right? So in that video game, that's where you would find a human cordyceps. But I don't think that as of yet there isn't an actual cordyceps type bug for us. All right, it's 2:20. That's it. That finishes off this unit. So we start the next unit on Monday. I'll probably start with nervous system because that seems to be the one that people wanted to get into the most. All right, so enjoy your weekend. Ibrahim, go play Last of Us. Bye.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.
Take care. Get those assignments in, those of you that have to finish them. I'll start marking again Monday.